All right, today we're going to unpack the principles of one of the most successful investors in history, Ray Dalio. And his core idea? Well, it's pretty radical. He says true success isn't about what you know, it's about how you deal with not knowing. It's a whole philosophy born from a spectacular failure, and honestly, it could change how you look at pretty much everything.
And it all kicks off with this paradox right here. Success doesn't come from what you already know, but from embracing what you don't. So how in the world does admitting you're clueless become a superpower? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to solve today.
So, where do we even start? With our mistakes. Dalia's whole argument is that the most valuable lessons, they're not in some textbook. Nope, they're forged in the fire of our own failures.
He uses this really powerful metaphor of a river. See, we're all just being carried forward, constantly bumping into new situations and new challenges. You can't stop the river, and you definitely can't avoid these encounters. The only thing you can control is how you decide to handle them. And this is where his principles come in. These aren't just vague rules you'd find on a poster. In Dalio's world, a principle is a practical tool. It's a smart, repeatable strategy that you develop for handling the same kinds of challenges that life keeps throwing at you, whether that's in your job, your relationships, anything. Now, what's really interesting here is the formula for actually creating those principles. It's so simple, it's kind of mind-blowing. Pain plus reflection equals progress. That sting of failure, that's not something you should run away from. It's a signal. Think about it. Say a presentation at work completely bombed. The pain is that awful feeling of embarrassment, right? But if you reflect, was I unprepared? Did I totally misunderstand my audience? You can create a new principle like, okay, from now on, I will always do a practice run with a friend. And just like that, that's progress. And listen, this isn't just some theory for Dalio, not at all. His entire philosophy was born from one of the most painful public failures you could possibly imagine. This is where the story gets really good. So back in the early 80s, Dalio was on top of the world, totally confident. He analyzed the markets and made this huge, very public bet that the US economy was about to hit a catastrophe. He put everything on the line. He was so certain he was right. And then, well, the exact opposite happened. The market took off on one of the longest bull runs in history. And he wasn't just a little bit off. In his own words, he was dead wrong. The sheer arrogance of being so certain about something so completely incorrect was, as he puts it, like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat. The consequences were just devastating. His company, Bridgewater, it just collapsed. He had to fire all his employees, people he said he genuinely cared about. The financial ruin was so total that he had to go ask his dad for a loan just to pay his family's bills, all while being completely humiliated in public. And this is the number that just makes it all so real. $4,000. That's what he had to borrow from his dad. This wasn't some abstract loss on a spreadsheet. This was a deeply personal, humbling, hit rock bottom moment. But it was right there, from that exact point of failure, that his entire system for success was born. So how do you possibly climb back from that kind of failure? Well, Dalio's answer wasn't to just try harder. It was to build a system, a repeatable process for turning any challenge, any failure into real progress. And this is the system he came up with, a 5-step process for evolution. It starts with setting really ambitious goals. Then, as you're chasing them, you're going to hit problems. That's step 2, identify them. Then, and this is the crucial part, you have to diagnose those problems to find the real root cause. Step 4, you design a plan to get around it. And finally, step 5, you execute that plan. And this isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous loop of striving, failing, learning, and getting better. And what's brilliant is that this process isn't just some business self-help trick. Dalio sees this pattern everywhere. From biology to economics, it's the fundamental cycle of evolution. Everything in the universe is either adapting and getting stronger, or it's dying. There is no standing still. Now, that 5-step process, it sounds pretty logical, right? Almost simple? So why don't more people do it? Because as Dalio found out the hard way, the biggest obstacles aren't out there in the world. They're inside our own heads. He points to 2 main enemies of our progress. First, there's the ego barrier. You know that little voice in your head that says, they just don't get it when someone critiques your idea? That's your ego. It makes you treat any feedback like a personal attack. And second, there's the blind spot barrier. This is the simple fact that you can't see what you can't see. It's why a brilliant engineer might be terrible at marketing They literally can't perceive the world through a customer's eyes.
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If our own brands are basically wired to get in our own way, how do we possibly break through that?
The solution is a massive shift in your mindset. You have to replace that short-term thrill of being proven right with the much deeper, long-term joy of learning what's actually true. You have to actively retrain your brain to get excited about discovering you're wrong, because that's where all the growth actually happens. Dalio says that when you make this shift, when you actively seek out smart people who disagree with you, it's completely transformative. It's like you've been seeing the world in black and white your entire life, and suddenly someone shows you what it looks like in full, vibrant color. You just start seeing reality on a totally different level. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most profound part of his entire philosophy. After building this whole system and achieving all this success, he realized something really surprising about what we're all chasing after. You know the goals we set for ourselves? The money, the promotion, the big achievements. Turns out they aren't the real prize. According to Dalio, they're just the bait. They're the shiny object that motivates us to get into the struggle in the first place.
Because the real reward is the evolution that happens along the way. The struggle itself, the process of getting stronger, of overcoming your ego, of learning to see in color alongside other smart people, that's the prize. The journey literally is the destination. So, in the end, this whole framework really just comes down to a choice. Embracing pain and fighting your own ego, it's not easy, but it's the only path to real growth. So the only question left is the one you see right here. How will you choose to evolve?